I've known about everything from the beginning, Elena said softly. But instead of exposing you, I wanted to understand why. Your father doesn't know about any of this, and he doesn't have to if you're willing to talk to me, honestly, about what's really going on. For the first time, Sarah saw Elena not as an enemy, but as someone who had given her multiple chances to change, to grow, to heal. The weight of her actions not just against Elena, but against Rachel, Catherine, and every other woman who had tried to love her father came crashing down. Through tears, Sarah finally voiced the fear that had driven her all along. I was afraid of losing him. Of not being enough anymore. Elena's response changed everything. Love isn't a finite resource, Sarah. Your father's heart didn't stop growing when your mother died, and it won't stop growing now. There's room for both of us if you let there be. That conversation marked the beginning of real change. With Elena's help, Sarah began therapy to address her abandonment issues. She reached out to Rachel and Catherine to apologize. Most importantly, she learned that letting her father find happiness didn't mean losing him. It meant their family could grow stronger, richer, and more full of love than ever before. Years later, at her father's wedding to Elena, Sarah gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. I once thought love was like a fortress that needed to be defended, she said, looking at her father and Elena. But you taught me that real love is like a garden. The more you nurture it, the more it grows, and there's always room for new flowers to bloom. But Sarah wasn't finished. That evening, seeing Elena preparing her father's favorite beef stew, she seized another opportunity. While Elena stepped away to take a call, Sarah slipped into the kitchen and poured an enormous amount of salt into the pot, quickly stirring to dissolve the evidence. She retreated to her room, waiting to hear her father's disgusted reaction. At dinner, Sarah watched intently as her father took his first bite. But instead of the expected grimace, Michael's face lit up with pleasure. "Elena, this is incredible," he exclaimed, eagerly taking another bite. "I don't think I've ever had stew this good." Sarah's triumphant smile froze as she took a bite from her own plate. The salt was overwhelming, burning her tongue and making her throat constrict. She glanced at her father in disbelief as he continued eating with obvious enjoyment. Then she caught Elena's subtle, knowing look from across the table, and understanding dawned. Elena had somehow anticipated her scheme and served her a different portion. Trapped by her own plot, Sarah couldn't leave her plate untouched. Her father despised wasting food, and any suspicious behavior would raise questions. So she forced herself to eat every bite of the over-salted stew, each mouthful a punishment for her attempted sabotage. Her eyes watered and her lips burned, but she maintained her facade, even as her stomach churned in protest. Elena watched Sarah struggle with quiet observation, her face betraying nothing but mild concern. As Michael finished his meal with satisfied appreciation, Sarah felt the bitter taste of defeat mixing with the salt in her mouth. But her biggest test was yet to come. The next morning, while searching through Elena's bag for anything she could use against her, Sarah discovered something that made her heart race: an inhaler and medical documents. Elena had asthma, the same condition that had claimed Sarah's mother's life. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the inhaler. This was the perfect weapon. Her father would never risk his heart again, not with someone who carried the same condition that had taken his first love. The memory of her mother's struggles, the terrifying attacks, and the final devastating loss that had shaped their lives would surely be enough to drive Elena away for good. But as Sarah sat on her bed, inhaler in hand, the weight of what she was considering pressed down on her. Using her mother's memory, her father's pain, as ammunition in her vendetta, was this really who she'd become? For the first time, Sarah felt genuine shame, not just at being caught, but at her own actions. Sarah's plan seemed perfect in its cruel simplicity. She placed a scented candle in her father's bedroom, knowing the smoke would trigger Elena's asthma. Then she left for her friend's apartment nearby, waiting for the inevitable call about Elena's condition being exposed. In her mind, this would be the final act that would drive Elena away forever. But fate had other plans. The call came, but not as she'd expected. An unknown number, a nurse's voice: "Your father's been rushed to the emergency room." The hospital corridor seemed endless as Sarah ran toward the burn unit. There she found her father, his face and body wrapped in bandages, barely recognizable. The candle she'd left had been knocked over by a draft, igniting a fire that spread through their home. Michael, smelling smoke, had rushed to investigate and found Elena collapsed on the floor, gasping for air amid the flames. Without hesitation, he'd shielded Elena with his own body, dragging her to safety even as the fire consumed his clothing. By the time they escaped, Michael had suffered severe burns across his face and body. Sarah stood frozen in the hospital room, the magnitude of what she'd done crushing her. Her father lay wrapped in bandages while Elena, who had suffered a severe asthma attack, was being treated in the next bed. Both alive only by miracle and Michael's selfless act of love. "Sarah." Her father's voice was barely a whisper, his eyes filled with pain that went deeper than his burns. "Why?" She fell to her knees beside his bed, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I only wanted her gone. I thought if you knew about her asthma, like Mom's. I wanted everything back the way it was. Just us." Michael closed his eyes, every movement causing him pain. "You let jealousy blind you so much you were willing to risk everything. You could have lost me today, Sarah. Was that worth it?" Sarah's sobs echoed through the room as she looked at Elena's unconscious form. The woman she tried to harm had done nothing but show her kindness, and in return, Sarah had nearly caused her death. Hours passed before Elena regained consciousness. When she opened her eyes and saw Sarah huddled in the corner, face streaked with tears, she did something extraordinary. She smiled. Despite the pain, despite knowing what Sarah had done, Elena's first response was one of compassion. "Come here," Elena whispered, her voice hoarse from the smoke. Sarah approached cautiously, shame making each step heavy. "I know why you did it," Elena said softly. "You love your father so much, you were willing to do anything to keep him. But love isn't meant to be hoarded, Sarah. It's meant to be shared, to grow, to heal." "I almost killed you both," Sarah choked out. "Yes," Elena agreed. "But you also taught us something important. Your father proved he would risk his life for me, and she paused, reaching for Sarah's hand. "I proved I could forgive the unforgivable, because that's what family does." In that moment, surrounded by the consequences of her actions, Sarah finally understood. True love wasn't about possession or control. It was about sacrifice, forgiveness, and the courage to let others in. The recovery was long and difficult. Michael's burns healed slowly, leaving scars that would never fully fade. But as his body healed, so did their family's bonds. Sarah attended therapy, working through her abandonment issues and learning to channel her love in healthier ways. Elena stood by them both, her presence no longer a threat but a source of strength. 1 year later, as Sarah helped Elena adjust her wedding veil, the two women caught each other's reflection in the mirror. The scars on Elena's wrist from the fire matched the ones visible above Michael's collar, permanent reminders of that terrible night, but also of the extraordinary capacity for love and forgiveness that had brought them all through it. "Ready to share him officially?" Elena asked softly. Sarah smiled, genuine and warm. "I already have. You taught me that love isn't like a fire that burns everything in its path. It's like the phoenix that rises from those ashes stronger, more beautiful, and able to soar higher than ever before." Together, they walked toward the chapel where Michael waited, a family forged not just by blood or marriage, but by the transformative power of forgiveness and the endless capacity of the human heart to love. You're still here. Elena's soft voice broke through Sarah's guilt-ridden thoughts. I don't know how to face you. How to fix this, Sarah whispered, unable to meet Elena's eyes. Start with the truth, Elena replied gently but firmly. Not just to me, but to your father. He deserves to know everything. Taking a deep breath, Sarah turned to her father. Through tears, she confessed everything: the sabotage of Rachel and Catherine's relationships, the planted evidence, the cruel manipulations, and finally, the deliberate plan to expose Elena's asthma that had led to the fire. When she finished, the hospital room fell into heavy silence. Michael's face remained unreadable, but his eyes held a sadness that cut deeper than any words could. I don't even know what to say, Sarah, he finally spoke, his voice trembling. You've betrayed me in ways I never imagined possible. But more than that, you've hurt innocent people all because you couldn't share my love. I'm so sorry, Dad, Sarah whispered. I'll do anything to make it right. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Michael sighed deeply, the bandages on his face shifting slightly. Sorry isn't enough, Sarah. You need to change, and change doesn't happen overnight. You've caused so much pain, but I hope this is the wake-up call you needed to become a better person. Turning to Elena, Michael's voice softened. I'm sorry for everything you've been through because of us. You never deserved any of this. Elena smiled faintly, reaching for both their hands. Love is mercy, Michael. And family is even more merciful. We'll heal from this together. In the months that followed, Sarah embarked on a journey of genuine transformation. She reached out to Rachel and Catherine, confessing her actions and asking for forgiveness. She began intensive therapy, finally confronting the deep-seated fears and jealousy that had driven her to such destructive behavior. The scars from the fire remained on her father's skin and in their hearts, but they became something more than just reminders of that terrible night. They became symbols of their survival, their capacity for forgiveness, and their journey toward healing. Slowly, carefully, Sarah rebuilt her relationship with her father. Even more remarkably, she developed a genuine friendship with Elena, who showed her that love truly does multiply when shared. For the first time in her life, Sarah understood that love wasn't a finite resource to be hoarded or controlled. It was an endless well that grew deeper and richer the more it was given away. Years later, Sarah stood in front of a group of college students, sharing her story as part of her work as a family counselor. The scars on her father's face had faded but never disappeared completely, a permanent reminder of how jealousy and possessiveness can destroy not just others, but ourselves. The hardest lesson I learned, she told them, her voice steady and sure, was that relationships aren't built on control or manipulation. They are built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. And no matter how far down a destructive path you've gone, healing begins with honesty and the willingness to change. She glanced at the back of the room, where her father and Elena sat, their hands intertwined, proud smiles on their faces. It's never too late to learn from your mistakes and start fresh. Because in the end, love isn't about possession, it's about growth, forgiveness, and the courage to let your heart expand to include others. The end. This is the final part of our story. Did you enjoy the journey? If you followed along from the beginning, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. We appreciate every one of you. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible tale. More exciting stories are coming soon. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family.